Stacy Tank is currently the Chief Transformation and Corporate Affairs Officer at Heineken, based in Amsterdam. Stacy is a member of the CEO's executive team and shepherds the company's new growth strategy, Evergreen, to ensure the organization adapts amidst a rapidly changing external environment. Stacy formerly led the multi-billion-dollar Home Depot installation services and Home Depot measurement services business for the Home Depot, the world's largest home improvement retailer. Dedicated to the intersection of business and positive impact on society, Stacy has repeatedly authored large-scale movements across enterprises like General Electric, Heineken, and Home Depot, including launching a $250 million commitment to veteran housing and a $50 million shop class program that is infusing 20,000 tradespeople in the U.S. economy. She graduated summa cum laude with a bachelor's degree from Syracuse University, where upon graduation, she was recognized as a Newhouse Scholar, School of Management Scholar, and overall University Scholar. Tank currently resides in the Netherlands. Leaders in Communications is a monthly speaker series that brings media leaders, influencers, and newsmakers to the Newhouse School for candid and insightful conversations. With a special emphasis on current trends and challenges, the series helps students keep a pace of a quickly changing communications industry and provides them with a connection to the professions they will eventually lead. The series is supported by the Hearst Speakers Fund. Today's conversation will be moderated by Brad Horn, Associate Dean of Strategic Initiatives and Professor of Public Relations at the Newhouse School. Please help me in giving Stacy and Brad a warm welcome.
And thank you, Kiana. All of my students are my favorite, but you were one of my favorite all-time students. It was March of 2001 when we had PRL 206 in this room due to COVID, and Kiana sat roughly 3 rows up on the left side where Paige is at. And ever since that time, she's continued to create her own stardom, and it's hard to believe you're already nearing the end of your Newhouse journey. So thank you for being with us tonight, and thanks to all of you. A tremendous thank you to you, Stacy Tank.
Great to be here.
Syracuse and Amsterdam are not close.
It's 22 hours door to door.
Oh my goodness. So explain what that is like, first and foremost. Obviously you've got roots here at the Newhouse School, probably family here in the U.S.
Yep.
What's it like having a great job at a great company living in Amsterdam?
Yeah, it's been a crazy, amazing journey, and I'm so grateful for it, honestly. I was having a huge rush of memories coming at me when I was driving up Waverly today. If you had told me what my life would end up being like, I would not have believed it, really. I came from a wonderful family, but a great middle class family. My mom was a teacher, my dad was an accountant. You know, my mom was first generation university educated. So to think that I could live on all these different continents, work for these big companies and contribute in this way, I didn't even know that was an option for me. And of course, Newhouse gave me a really good launching pad. So I'm grateful. I love living in Europe right now. I love being out of my comfort zone. So I've lived in Brazil, I lived in Mexico, I've lived in Germany, in the UK, in Paris, and now in Amsterdam. So it's great. There are a lot of bicycles and a lot of fit people because of the bicycles. There's a lot of rain. But you can also jump in, I jump in my electric car and drive to Belgium or drive to France, drive to Germany, and experience all of it. It's really a gift.
Yeah, I have only been once, and it included a trip to the Heineken Experience in November of 2017, and was almost run over by a few bicycles.
I'm sorry about that.
Yes, but alas, back to our conversation tonight, and I like what Kiana talked about, this being a candid look at communications and business. As we have a variety of students and faculty and staff in the room tonight, what is the state of business and communications in 2023 in your eyes?
Yeah, I think other than climate change, the single biggest threat to humanity is the state of communications in the world. Misinformation, disinformation, polarization. And a lot of good can come from the global flow of information. You can bring education to people that wouldn't have access to it. There are so many beautiful things, but there's also a lot of confusion. There's a lot of hate and strife. And I think running a global organization, whether you're running a government or an NGO or a business today, feels really different than even 5 years ago because of the swirl and the churn and the expectations and this polarized state of the world. I look at the Edelman Trust Barometer every year when it comes out at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and you can see there is one chart that I really like because we're a very global business by country, the state of polarization. And certainly the country that we're sitting in right now is one of the most polarized out of all of them. So I think the students who are coming out of Newhouse have a really big job to do to figure out how we can both disagree with each other, because that is really important and the bedrock of democracy, that we should never all have the same point of view. This is a beautiful thing, but it doesn't mean we have to hate each other. And it doesn't mean we have to be at war with each other. It actually means that we need to listen to each other and then realize that we're also all humans and we have a lot more in common than what divides us. But communication plays a key role in translating across these divides. If you look at communities in social media, whether you're on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, or pick your platform, you can see the decampment of people. There are very few individuals that straddle the bubbles in both worlds on different topics. And I think the students coming out of Newhouse have to be those bridges to figure out how can we still live in a society that's functional, in a community where we're all leaning in and not leaning out, not pointing fingers that way, maybe pointing fingers this way to say, what can I do to contribute? So yeah, I think it's the topic right now in business, yeah.
And so at the intersection of business and communications, and you were a dual major when you were here,
Yes.
right? Whitman
Yes.
and Newhouse, and I can already tell by looking out at the room, I know a few dual majors here in the room tonight. As a TRF major, right? And then marketing management at Whitman.
Yes.
Thinking about, and you mentioned the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is so foundational to public relations and our ability as organizations to maintain healthy relationships with our publics. What is the state of trust? And Edelman will tell us certain things, but how do you feel that trust is viewed as a society and the role that communication plays in helping to build it?
Yeah. I have to think how many years this was ago now. Something like 5 years ago, I was in Arizona at an event for chief communications officers, and Richard Edelman was there. I've known Richard for 20 years, and he wakes up really early, and he said, hey, do you want to go for a hike tomorrow morning? I'm going to leave at 4 a.m. And I said, bring it on, Richard. Do you ever say no to this? So Richard and I, and it's actually a funny story because I'm a total early bird. I'm always early to the point where it's weird. I'm like, don't be that weird person that's so early, right? And so I didn't want to be super weird. So I got up really early because I didn't want to oversleep for my Richard Edelman hike. Having my coffee, whatever, and the lobby calls. It's like 3:45 a.m. Like, Richard is here waiting for you. I was like, we said 4. Like, what do you mean? So anyway, I have this 2 hours with him hiking up this big Camelback Mountain, and I got the opportunity to ask him, Richard, how did you know 22 years ago or whatever it is now, how did you know that trust would be the topic? How did he know, right? Because this is the topic of the moment. And of course, he just has great judgment, and he just said, I had a hunch that this was going to be the topic of our lifetime. The interesting thing about trust is that it's not the same speed everywhere. We're in 70 countries, or our products are in 140 countries. We have 70 businesses by geography, like Brazil and Cambodia and Mexico and all of that. And when you look at the state of trust, in some countries, actually trust is pretty healthy. But then in other countries, it's less so. And that tends to go along government, design of government and society lines. So if you have a more homogenous culture, if you have a less democratic culture, you tend to have higher trust. But in countries like the States, certainly the country that I live in right now, the Netherlands, there's incredible polarization that's growing. And so trust isn't healthy. You know, that the state of trust is very much at play. The good news in the trust barometer the last few years is that there is trust in business. And that means business has a platform, but it also means business has a massive responsibility. When we were going through COVID, and I got COVID the first week of lockdown. I've had COVID 4 times, and I did not do great with COVID. It ended up causing all these health issues for me. And I remember in March 2020 when I got COVID for the first time, and all the news outlets were, you know, it was like everything was on fire and it was so scary. And I remember thinking, I'm so grateful that I'm a citizen of my company right now, because I believe our chief medical officer, and they're giving me this information, and this is literally what I'm going by. What should I be taking for my medicines? How should I be getting health care? You know, what am I, you know, gonna make it? You know, all of this kind of information I was getting from my company, because companies are the most trusted source of information today. So that's a very big role to live up to, and it's very complicated in a polarized society where if we have 90,000 employees, of course they're not all homogenous thinkers. They have a lot of different opinions on topics, and we're gonna have a way of working as a company that not everyone's gonna, of course, agree with. So it's complicated, but I think the biggest driver of trust for us during COVID, but now with all the input cost inflation and supply chain disruption and the war in the Ukraine, and it's communicating. It's staying in dialogue with our folks. It's also telling them, asking them, inviting them to share their views and their thoughts. What do you think about this? What are we missing? And then listening and then improving. So staying in that constant state of dialogue, I think, is one of the most healthy things you can do to bolster trust.
Yeah, and for those not familiar with that, business outranking media, outranking NGOs, outranking governments. When you look at social media, very, very low in terms of trust. You look at traditional media, very low. But employers and employee communications consistently, at least in the US and Canada, at the top. So that gives business a great opportunity. So as a transition to this title of Chief Transformation Officer, what are you transforming and how are you doing it so that you can help Heineken with this very challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. So March 2020, I had COVID. I had a terrible fever. I was super sick. And I read in the Google alerts that this guy, Dolph Van den Brink, who I worked for in New York years before, got promoted to the global CEO role of Heineken. And from my deathbed, I texted him, you know, congratulations, I'm so happy for you. This is great news. And he wrote back, thanks, ... Can you talk? So we got on the phone and he said, what got us here won't get us there. We are a 156-year-old company. We've grown through many seasons, but now our CEO of 15 years has retired. Our growth strategy is at the end of its run anyway. It was concluding in 2020. Now we have COVID and the world feels like it's on fire. Where are we going next as a company? In the meantime, we have this new CEO, 9 of 11 executive, you say executive committee in Europe, but it's the top team, the leadership team. 9 of 11 of those members are new. So it's the dawn of a new day. We want to build a new growth strategy together, and then we want to bring that to life. Will you come and be the Chief Transformation Officer? He's very compelling, very good salesy. You know, I get off the phone, I'm like, yeah, this is great, Chief Transformation Officer, wow. I have no idea what this role is. I go to my computer and I Google, what is a Chief Transformation Officer? And not a lot came back, frankly, because it was a pretty new role and not a very common role. In the last 3 years, there are a lot more Chief Transformation Officers out there. And I have people reach out to me that say, I'm new in the role, how do you define the role? This is how we're gonna define the role. And the McKinseys and the Bains and the BCGs of the world are publishing a lot of things on Chief Transformation Officers. And it can mean a lot of different things, but this is what it means for us. And this is kind of originating the role, so we made it up. So it's not necessarily right or wrong, it's just what we made up. First, we said we want to co-create this new growth strategy with our employees. So we brought 150 leaders together from around the world digitally because it was COVID. We had 5 work streams: growth, being smart with our costs, digitizing our route to market, investing in people and culture, and sustainability and responsibility. We organized folks along those 5 work streams, and 2 members of the executive team were co-captaining each of the work streams. And we said, what's the state of the outside world, the shared reality? What are we good at inside Heineken and what we're passionate about? And then what do we want to do going forward? What are the big, bold moves that we want to take? And where do we want to invest and create advantage for the future and make our customers and our consumers really excited about what we're doing? And then we hatched the first version of what we call Evergreen. We took cues from nature and from evergreen trees, which are constantly renewing themselves. We said, we know we can't stand still. We need to constantly be renewing ourselves so that we can continue to thrive. And so Evergreen was born. We brought it to our employees, to our board, to the investors. And then we had to start delivering it, operationalizing it. So we created a transformation network. We have a head of transformation in every country in the world. We're organized into 4 regions. So we have a chief transformation officer for the 4 regions and then into the center team. And now we're holding this change. So we're trying to bring Evergreen to life. We have big programs that we're investing in big ways that we think will create advantage for the future, whether that's digitizing our route to market with the cool new app where you can order everything if you're one of our customers, to decarbonizing all of our breweries, 200 breweries across the world in the next 7 years, all these types of things. Some things that we're good at, launching new products, this type of thing, we know how to do it. We can always be better. But there are big places where we don't have the skill. We're not known, for example, being great with cost. So the first thing that we did as part of Evergreen, or one of the first things, is we announced a €2 billion cost out. And we're going to over-deliver it this year, and then we're going to deliver €400 million of cost out every year thereafter. That was something the Transformation Network needed to get involved in because we didn't have ways of working, systems, behaviors, training, capabilities to be able to do that. Decarbonization would be another example where we're holding the change. So that's the transformation. It's underway. We're going into year 3 of Evergreen now. We're starting to get momentum, but definitely a lot more to do.
So out of that process, and you mentioned 2 groups that I want to revisit, who matters most, right? Like, how are you making these decisions about what matters on a global brand standpoint, what matters to the message, what matters to the bottom line?
Yeah. I think from a stakeholder perspective, I always feel that our employees are the most important stakeholder. We have a lot of stakeholders, but if your employees aren't thriving, you don't go anywhere else. Your employees take care of your customers and your consumers, and they're doing all of this work. They're often are the closest to the customer, so they know what's going to work, what's not going to work. So we need to be listening and working together and prioritizing the employees. And of course, we're always sensing, where is the world going? I think at Newhouse, I'm sure you prioritize a lot listening to what's happening in the outside world and then bringing that in. The communications function is one of the most externally facing functions in any organization, and this is so important because the world, I love the expression, the world will never be as slow as it is today. Things are only going faster and faster, so we have to be listening to the outside world, to trends, to technology. I don't know if you're using some of the amazing new AI bots to be able to do your term papers, but I used it to write a speech the other day and thought, wow, this is actually not so bad, and I would have spent an hour on this. So the world is really unbelievable, and the things that are discovered and launched every day. And then what are our consumers thinking and doing? Where are they going? During COVID, people were socializing in a different way. We're an inherently social company. We love the joy of true togetherness, bringing people together for that moment. We say, hey, how was your day? How was your day? And you connect as humans. Even though you might disagree on 80% of the topics you could discuss, we still come together around the dinner table. We still go to the bar and we have a beer together and we connect. But consumers are connecting. They're socializing in different ways. During COVID, sometimes it was on your phone. I'm Jewish, we had Passover on our phone. For the first time, I set up my iPad at the end of the table and we did Passover and everyone did it on Zoom. This is the new way to socialize. So how are things shifting? How are we using our homes to entertain differently? Maybe I think you have an e-gaming suite downstairs. I think staying very in touch with where the consumers and customers in the world is going is absolutely critical. And then translating that back into your company's strategy to say, now, how can we help? What role can we play? What are the intersections between the needs and what we're good at or passionate about, where we have the right to win, the will to win, And that's what Evergreen's all about. Then Evergreen identifies those things and gets us going.
It would appear that one pathway, or maybe the argument could be made for the pathway, to think about success in 2023 is defined by people, planet, and profit. I talk about this in my courses about corporate social responsibility, but we see it in action every day. And you called out two parts of this transformation piece: invest in people and culture, and then thinking about sustainability.
Yeah.
Let's take the first one, people and culture. How do you invest in people in an era and time when, to your point, everything is so digitally focused? And we know that trust in social has never been lower, but yet everybody's funneling through that activity. So I'm curious what that investment in people looks like, whether that's employees, distributors, all the supply chain pieces from your standpoint.
Sure, yeah. Starting with our employees, one of the first things that we did in 2020 and 2021 was ask some of the big questions that would then help to keep shaping our culture. Like, why do we exist? What do we value? How should we behave? And we co-created through massive online brainstorms and all of this, our purpose, our values, which we had but we refreshed, and then the behaviors that we wanted to focus on to bring Evergreen to life. So we created those things together. It took a long time. The Dutch culture is very consensus-oriented. I learned this both at work but also in an interesting way in my personal life. One of my kids is a big ice hockey player, and he was playing in the Netherlands, and the coach, we noticed in the first season, wanted to change the lineup, change the lines, who's on certain lines. And he started asking the parents for their input and basically for their approval. Like, oh, what do you think? We're going to put Jack on the line with, Thomas and think it goes well. And I'm like, yeah, but you're the coach. I don't know anything about hockey. I'm totally unqualified to decide if Jack and Thomas should be on the same line. And we trust you. So please, don't worry about it. Just go. But this idea of consensus and everyone getting to raise their voice and share their opinion and create it together is actually a really beautiful thing. And this is very Dutch. So we co-created all of these things, and then they helped as our guiding light to build the next phase of our culture, to protect the 156 years and the beauty of the family company. Heineken is a person's name. It's a family's name. And we have this beautiful 4 generations now going into 5th generation of heritage with this family who started with this one person when his father passed away, who created this brewing company that grew into now the 2nd largest brewer in the world. How do we preserve and honor all of that and stand on the shoulders of all of those folks and ready ourselves to compete and to win in this next phase? And the purpose, the values, the behaviors had a lot to do with that.
And staying true, I think, to your own values is a defining time, I guess, test of your corporate will. We can talk about maybe the planet piece, and how you bring those ideas to actual change, but also the bigger question of how do you stay true to what you're creating and the vision that you have for those values that define your mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe to start with the sustainability and responsibility piece.
Sure.
When we were getting going with Evergreen in 2020, one of the first things we did is ask ourselves, what is success? We had a value creation model we called the Golden Triangle, and it had top-line growth, profit, and capital allocation. How do you use your money to get a good return? So those things were an equal importance, and all of the remuneration, like people, the way they were paid and all of that was based on that model of success. We changed that triangle into a diamond. We call it the green diamond, and we added sustainability and responsibility on equal footing. So now we ask 4 questions. Does it drive the top line? Does it drive profit? Is it wise with our capital? Is it sustainable and responsible? And if it's not a yes, 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 it's a no. And that sent a very clear message through the organization. And then it's nice to have a symbol on a PowerPoint slide, but you have to actually incorporate it into the way that you're running the business. So we looked at all of the touch points. For example, remuneration, pay. Now you get paid on all 4 corners, meaning if we don't hit our decarbonization targets, if we don't get our hectoliter per hectoliter water efficiency targets, if we're not delivering on our gender representation targets, people do not get their full pay, which motivates people. Then we were looking at dashboards that we use for business reviews, for example. And in those business reviews, you might get classically asked a question, are you gaining market share? How's your gross margin? What's going on with your innovation rate? Now, on that same dashboard, you can see all of the sustainability and responsibility metrics on the same page. So this is deeply woven into the fabric of how we're running the company, and there's nowhere to hide. You are accountable, not just for a part of it, because people often ask me, yeah, but how do you trade off growing the business and sustainability and responsibility? And the answer is it's a false choice. You can't make that choice. You have to do both. But if you don't have it all incorporated into the way you run the company, I think in reality it's hard to deliver it.
And how's that viewed through a global lens, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, there's a couple of things at work when we come to see ESG and we see corporate social responsibility.
Yeah.
It's tied directly to capitalism, and maybe is capitalism because of a result of the profits. But now, even in the US, seeing backlash against this ideal that, oh, people don't matter, planet doesn't matter, it's just profit. And so I'm curious from a global perspective, you're working with brands globally every day, how that philosophy may or may not translate.
Yeah, I feel very lucky that we're a family company, because when we were having this discussion with the supervisory board, there was never a question about whether we were going to prioritize sustainability and responsibility and do things like make sure that there was equal pay for equal work, make sure that we're paying fair and living wage, not just to our employees, but to those who operate around our business. There is no question. Charlene Heineken and the Heinekens are sitting at the table. It's their name on the door. We are going to do our best stuff to take care of people and the community and the planet. So what I think is happening in this ESG space is that, like with any trend, things can be used for good or evil, things can be misconstrued, there is greenwashing, and we have had for the last, I guess, 15 years, a variety of standards and requirements and things that a lot of companies have adopted to try to say, here's what we're doing in an objective way. And it's sort of like an alphabet soup. There are so many ways we're trying to disclose. There's so much confusion. There's not comparability across industries. So something, I think it will end up being really good, happened at COP26 in Glasgow. My CEO. The two men that I talk to the most in my life, my CEO and my husband. Our CEO, Dolph, and I attended in Glasgow, COP26. And at COP26, they launched something called the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board. What is this thing? This is a set of new standards for non-financial reporting. So financial reporting is all your cash and your revenues and your gross margin, like all the numbery stuff that goes into your income statement and your balance sheet and your cash flow statement. That's financial reporting. It's been around for 700 years, by the way. So we've had 700 years to get good at it, and we're good at it. If you're in finance, you know how to close the books, you're doing your financial disclosures. Now there's this whole second world of non-financial reporting. What is that? It's disclosing things around safety and accidents. It can be training. It can even be, in the Netherlands, there are new laws where we have to disclose the commuting distances for our employees, for example. It can be your water usage. It can be your carbon footprint. It can be data around packaging. It can be around your use of fossil fuels. It can be a lot of different things. And that non-financial reporting is now going to be standardized and required by law. Here in the United States, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, I think still has out for comment the new rules that will be required for all publicly listed companies in the United States. And for the first time, we're going to have consistent standards for how non-financial reporting is going to come from all the publicly listed companies. In Europe, we have a piece of legislation called the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. That's what we'll follow because we're a European listed company. I hope it's going to be a mess in the beginning, because when you try to do new things, it's a giant mess. But I hope 5 years from now, what you're going to see is much more transparency that people can actually understand. Hopefully less greenwashing, because your carbon footprint's your carbon footprint, right? It's there, so you can say objectively, from our baseline of 2018, we've reduced our total absolute carbon emissions by 18% at Heineken. That's a fact. We will disclose that. I hope that things like this will help. and then folks that are, I think, often with good intentions, wading into a kind of over-marketed expression of some sustainability benefit. There's also a lot of litigation around that now, so people are getting sued. So I hope, the pendulum is always going like this, right, swinging. I think that pendulum on the greenwashing claims is going to come down, and then the reporting should swing back and give us something hopefully we can actually understand. Yeah.
Fascinating, and constant change.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of how do we move in a space that is constantly evolving. One question about culture, because you've lived in so many places. I would, I guess, on a limb or on a lark say that you deal with multiple nations every day.
Yeah.
What are the ways in which cultural or cross-cultural competencies are both a part of your daily management and the management of your teams to ensure you're doing business the right way based off of where you're doing business?
Yeah. I think in my direct team right now, we have 21 nationalities, just in my central team. So it's a United Nations of folks that are coming together. Having the shared Heineken culture is helpful, that we all have the same purpose, the same values, the same behaviors. So we talk a lot of the same lingo, we have the same mission with Evergreen, but there's a lot of cultural nuance. And that cultural nuance, sometimes you don't realize it's there until you really bump into it. There's an amazing book called The Culture Code. And in that book, you can map your own culture with other cultures. Actually, fun fact, guessing game. Guess the country where Americans are most likely to fail as expats because of cultural conflict. Just call out. Where do you think it is? China. I heard China. Some other guesses. The UK. Who said it? That's right. That's right. It's the UK. So, which I was shocked when I learned that stat, because I thought, oh, but it's the same language.
Right.
And, you know, we're from there, really. I mean, the settler, not the native people. And by the way, I was very moved by the way you opened to honor the native people in this land, which is incredibly meaningful. We had settlers coming from England, and then the United States in its modern form was founded. So I would have assumed we could all assimilate very well. But then what you do is you don't realize there are some really profound cultural differences that you fail to honor, and then you fail in your effectiveness in your role. So culture plays a really big role, and sometimes you can see it, and sometimes you can't see it. And this book, The Culture Code, is something I've used many times to try to understand what I'm going to hit up against. And living in the Netherlands, I'm the second woman to ever be on the executive committee at Heineken in 156 years. I'm the youngest, and I'm the first American. And the biggest point of difference is the citizenship part, not the rest of it. And so going into this role, I was told, and I was also asking some of my colleagues, okay, help me get underneath this. Where am I going to bump into the Dutch culture in a way that might not honor the Dutch culture, and where people might not be able to hear and see me, and I won't be able to build trust with them quickly so we can work together and get things done together. And so I work to modify, for example, I'm a very positive person. And I might walk in and, see your tie and say, I love your tie. That's a great tie. It's just really my personality. Or I might say, I saw that presentation you gave, and I thought it was terrific. And actually on slide 3, I'm going to use that quote. That's really great. That's not something you should do in the Netherlands. No, you should not be so positive. It's just looked at as fake and disingenuous. That was really helpful to know. Because every day I wake up and my energy is a lot, and it's out there and it's big and I'm connecting. And then when I could try to appreciate the fact that it seems fake and disingenuous, I could adapt a little bit. Not so much where I lose myself, but I can adapt a little bit. So culture plays a massive role in a big global company where there are 70 different countries at play.
Yeah, fascinating work. Let's go global to local. A few years back, you were here in these halls of Newhouse. Yeah. Did you ever think that global transformation would be your future? And maybe talk about your experiences here, and then what has happened to you since you left that got you to where you are today?
Yeah, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I think that's no matter what your age, I think that's a perfectly acceptable answer. When I came here, I started as a broadcast journalism major, and then I had some experiences. I was anchoring in the campus news. I worked at the local ABC affiliate, and I thought, I think I'm going to switch to TRF, because I think if I want to do broadcast journalism, I can still do it with a TRF major, and I'm kind of interested in filmmaking and making things. I was always the person at like my prom with a video recording camera. I loved recording things. I liked the visual storytelling. So I became a TRF major. Then I was going to graduate too early, which don't tell my parents. I was like, I need to stay on campus a little longer. I don't want to graduate in less than 3.5 years. And so I got the school of management, dual major. And then I started exploring, and it was just listening, learning, okay, accounting. I appreciate accounting, but it doesn't give me a lot of energy. I don't think I'm going to end up being an accountant. Supply chain, okay, I do that. Entrepreneurship, ooh, now that was more interesting to me. It was trying things. I was interning in a lot of different places, ad agency, at the TV studio, at a nonprofit, in a big company, and seeing where's my energy. I started at GE in a marketing communications program. And then I went into their corporate audit staff and worked in finance for many years to follow, and was the finance leader for an industrial water business after that. Kind of bounced around. Then most recently I was running a multi-billion-dollar business for Home Depot and putting all of that together. And I thought I'd run businesses forever, and I truly loved it, and it almost killed me, but I still loved it. I felt so fulfilled by the challenge of it. And then this phone call to be the Chief Transformation Officer. So all I can say is that I love adventure. I love being completely out of my comfort zone, and I've said yes to much more than I've said no to. And that has led me down some roads that I never thought I would ever go down, and I didn't even know existed. And it's been such a joy and a privilege. And by the way, I want to give a plug for, is there still that spelling, grammar, punctuation test at Newhouse? That is important.
Yes.
That prepared me very well. So no matter what you do, if you go to become a CEO, or you're going to be a journalist, or whatever you're going to do, you should keep that grammar, spelling, punctuation test, because there are some of those fundamentals that you're learning here, regardless of which job you pursue. And you may have 10 careers, right? And we reinvent ourselves all the time. But having the good fundamentals, how you can think, how do you debate, how do you connect with people, how can you be a great teammate, how can you be a great writer and a great purveyor of ideas and a communicator. These are super foundational in every role that I've been in. For example, when I was turning around the businesses at Home Depot, they were very challenged, and people were very upset and angry, and they had every right to be. And one of the first things we did was we started a town hall that was sort of like a TV show, because not everyone was in the same place. So we would broadcast out for an hour at an anchor desk, and we would say, you know, this is what we hear and what's not working, and here's what we're going to do to try to make it better. And then we would do live Q&A, anonymous. And people could vote up and down what they wanted us to answer. And it was not pretty the first couple of months. People were so angry. They were saying, who are you, lady? Like, you're never going to last. Like, the last few people that were here and just got fired because we're all losers and it's never going to work and you're a liar and all these things. And it was really important for them to ventilate. And that was healthy, and they should ventilate at me. And by the way, I was responsible. So I take the feedback completely. And then what they realized was I was listening to them, and I got a lot of gray hairs and a lot of wrinkles, but we figured out together how to turn that thing around. But I guarantee you, if I hadn't sat at a news anchor desk in this building, I don't know if I could have done that. So a lot of the skills, and I wasn't the communications person, I was the CEO. But a lot of the skills that you're learning here, they will serve you so well, because the world is requiring us to engage in different ways, and communication is the bedrock of all of it.
I think I heard you say earlier, outside of this program, that you knew that you wanted to live the world, or travel the world, or live in other cultures.
Yeah.
Whether it's the question is focused on global experiences, or simply how do you funnel your passion to success? What are the ways that you've been able to have those dreams come true?
Yeah. I think it's saying yes a lot. Also finding the places where you can do those things. So I interned at an ad agency, I interned at the TV station, all the stuff. And then when I got inside a big company, all of a sudden I went, whoa, I think this is what I was looking for. What do you mean you got to do an assignment in Switzerland? What do you mean you got to live in China? You can do that in a big company? How do I do that? You know, then I discovered I was like a truffle pig, like looking for these opportunities. And then I would stay, you know, I ended up joining GE. My first assignment was in Paris. And they sent me in a corporate apartment. I remember I landed, I didn't speak any French, I couldn't pronounce a single thing. And I couldn't even tell the taxi driver my address because I couldn't pronounce the roads properly. So I had to write it down on a little sheet of paper. I handed it to my taxi driver, and he dropped me off with 2 suitcases, and I looked up at the building and was alone, you know, at 20 years old for the first time in my life living abroad. This was the most thrilling, terrifying experience of my life. And if you watch Emily in Paris, I made every mistake without the chef and all the exciting parts, but all the cultural gaffes and everything, I did every single one of them 10 times, and it was extraordinary. And then they moved me again all over the world, and then I was also out in the community a lot, volunteering. I was sitting on nonprofit boards and community boards. It was through one of those boards that I ended up at that job at Heineken. And a guy reached out to me after Googling me and said, do you want to have a coffee? And I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Is this safe? You know, I told my husband, I'm meeting this person from Heineken. You know, if I don't come back in 2 hours, call the police. But, you know, I said yes. I said yes to the coffee. And then it was amazing. You know, it was this, I took the risk. And then I was so gutted to leave GE because they had done so much for me. But I took the risk, and I went to Heineken, and I took the risk, and I went to Home Depot kind of against all odds, but then I got to run this multi-billion-dollar business. So I think it's just letting curiosity be your guide, putting yourself out there, saying yes, listening, sensing, and not being afraid to. Sometimes, you know, you take a risk that a lot of my family and friends were saying, what are you doing? This is crazy. But in my gut, I knew that this was the right thing for me to push myself and to learn.
Excellent. So many wonderful lessons. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I know we want to take some questions from you, and I believe Kennedy has a mic. Hi, Kennedy.
Hi, Kennedy.
So if you do have a question, my request would be to identify yourself, your year and major, and your hometown as a preface to your question.
Nice.
So let's take some questions.
Will be our brave first. I will also start calling on people if that's better. No. I'm just kidding. I will not call on you.
Right here in the front.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Alexa Seltzer. I'm a freshman. I'm from Fairfield, Connecticut.
You're from Fairfield?
Yeah.
I lived for 6 years in Fairfield. It's where my second son was born.
Yes, I love it there. It's my
Cool.
favorite place.
Oh.
My question to you, since I'm a freshman, I don't really know where I'm going, and I'm really super early in my career. So I was wondering how you came up with the idea of where you are right now. Like, how did you figure out that you wanted to be the person that you are today?
Yeah. It's such a good question. Honestly, this is a question I think we're all going to ask ourselves for our whole lives. So if you're holding this question and it feels very heavy, just know that this is kind of the meaning of life question, and we're all going to ask it forever. So it's okay to hold that question. It's also okay to change your mind all the time. I think part of how I started sensing where I should go, and even choosing Newhouse and choosing communications first, was through feedback I got from other folks. Like a little bit what my teachers would say, oh, you know, you're good at that, or did you think about doing this? And that helped to guide me, and people were always saying, okay, communication, you speak well, you put ideas together, you tell stories. And so that's how Newhouse was on my radar. At the same time, my superlative in high school, do they still do superlatives? You know, best eyes or whatever. We had most likely to be president. That's the one I got, most likely to be president. I'm never going to politics, but we didn't have most likely to be CEO. And I also think there was something in me. I like to run stuff. I'm organized, and I like to kind of stay up all night and do stuff. Like, I'm very driven. I like to play to win. And so I also got feedback from the community around me, like, probably you're going to be someone who runs stuff. You seem to like to do that. So I was always listening for that, absent knowing exactly what I wanted to do. But I also knew what gave me energy and what I loved. What I also thought was amazing about being on campus here is that I have a lot of interests and I got to do a lot of things here. So because I was a Newhouse student, I got to be in courses here and do all of that. Then school management, I got to do that. But I also grew up in the theater. I love theater. I still, next week, for the first time in my whole life, I'm gonna play my guitar and sing in a theater in Amsterdam for the first time. I'm so scared, but I said, I'm doing it. I'm pushing myself to do it. And I got to do FYP here in my first year. And I got to be in a chorus line, which is a dancing show. I also am not a trained dancer, so I got to push myself. I would just say do so many things and see what gives you energy. And especially if there are things that you think you'd be interested in, but people are like, no, I don't think you can do that. Push, convince them, get yourself in there. That's what these years are really about too, is trying stuff. And people should give you a chance to try things and see if you like it. And the reality is, if you change your mind a million times, it's beautiful too, and everyone in this room will. So don't overjudge yourself. Yeah, thank you.
Right over here in the middle, about 6 rows up.
Hello, my name is Gustavo. I'm a freshman, and I'm studying public relations and political science, and I'm from Mexico City. And my question to you is, in all these leadership positions that you've been in, I think my main question is, what do you consider makes a good leader? And how do you get people to trust you? And most importantly, to follow you? Or like trust your decisions?
These are good questions. I think that, I was just doing performance reviews with my team. Yesterday I had one, and the day before. And we were talking about what we think works with our relationship. And what this person was saying to me was that he just felt like we had no drama, we just worked together, and I don't second guess him, that I extend trust in him, and then he feels like he can extend trust in me, and that no matter what, I've got his back, and I will fight for him, and I'll protect him too if it's needed, which it never is because he's amazing. So I think it has something to do with that, really knowing at a human level, like I've got you. And then you have to also show that that's real. It can't just be something you say. I think your actions, they say actions speak louder than words. I think that's really true. So when you're in the fire, how are you behaving? And are you really there for your folks? I think listening is also really, really important. And sensing. How are your people? Where are they have the capabilities to thrive in what they're trying to do? And where might they end up being in harm's way because they're exhausted, because they might not have the skills? And that's when, as a leader, you can go in and either coach, you can get them some training, you can just take something off their plate. So I think this listening and sensing thing is incredibly important. And then also kind of giving away every ounce of credit to your team and making sure that they're the rock stars and that they shine. And it took me a little while to figure that out in the beginning of my career, but frankly, that's a quiet confidence that I think comes over time that you don't really need as a leader. People will figure out and your job as a leader also is to put the right people in the right roles, to take roadblocks out of their way and help them shine. And then when something's going a little bit bumpy, you can jump in and you can get it back on track in a variety of different ways. But really holding people up and knowing what their dreams are and helping them achieve that, I think goes a long way. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we have, looks like 3 hands, closest right there.
Hi, I'm Cameron. I am a freshman communication and rhetorical studies major, and I'm from Brockport, New York. And my question to you, so my mom is is our CEO of our family company, and she's always talking about like her core values. And I'm just wondering if you have like one core value that you have that like to keep your people close to you.
Yeah, it's a good one. Picking one is hard, I'm thinking. There are probably a couple, so I'm not very good with rules, so I'll break the rule a little bit. I think that caring about humans is really, really important. And making sure that folks feel that, work aside, that you see the human and you care about the human, first and foremost. Because we're all people with families, with lives, and that's actually much more important than work. Much, much more important than work. So that's a big one, and one that I learned over time as I had more experiences. I also think that doing fun work that matters is very motivating. I like to do things that people say can't be done and create and invent new things and drive big results, and it's that wow, like wow, I can't believe we could just do that. Wow, can't believe what you just did. Wow. So there's something about do big stuff. Our head of digital, he says, we do cool shit. You know, he's like, we want to do cool shit, right? That's very motivating. And sometimes that's decarbonizing, sometimes that's bringing water to a community that's never had access to clean water, and sometimes that's just driving great top line growth. You know, doing cool stuff, it can come in a lot of forms. And then I think we need to have fun too. Because again, life's short and work sometimes has to be serious, but a lot of the time it should be joyful and it should be fun. Yeah, thank you.
Great question. Okay, Kennedy, a couple rows behind you, maybe 4 or 5 rows to your left.
Yeah, I'm Tom, 72 Religion. I'm here in Syracuse. It sounds like you partly answered one of my questions about your water work, but to introduce Tikkun Olam, you know what Tikkun Olam is, I imagine.
Oh dear, I don't. Please tell me.
Okay, that's the Jewish phrase for fixing the world.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. And President Carter went into hospice about 3 or 4 days ago, and his 2 Tikkun Olam fixes were monitoring elections around the world and guinea worm disease, eradicating it, as well as building houses for the homeless. So he had quite a few projects of Tikkun Olam. Here in Syracuse, we don't have a UNICEF chapter like Rochester does. And there are certainly a lot of needs in the world. Has Heineken, I mean, from what you said, Heineken is in the field of water because of beer, but is there something that you could really think of that would be like eradicating guinea worm disease? You know, some like very broad human problem that Heineken would face and really make a dent in, you know, like get rid of 50% of it or something?
Yeah. Oh, super question. Thank you. There's one big thought that's coming to my mind, and it's not going to be probably what you expect, but we've had an industrial revolution in the world over the last, what is it, 100 years? How many years of the Industrial Revolution? More than that. And we've almost destroyed the planet. If you look at what's happening with extreme weather, it's shocking, really. People are losing their lives. We're going to have 1 billion climate refugees coming from the southern hemisphere into the northern hemisphere. We're going to have to really get real about immigration and figure out how to help these folks who can't farm. There's too much heat, there's too little heat, there's too little water, there's too much water. It's destroying people's lives. And I always think you have to start where you are and with what your responsibilities are. We're a brewer. We have 200 breweries. We have got to decarbonize those breweries. We will be the first generation of leaders who will truly run net zero carbon businesses. This is so hard. We have 10,000 engineering projects that we need to deliver in the next 7 years to decarbonize these businesses. We're going to spend a shocking amount of capital, shocking. Most companies wouldn't spend this capital to do it. We're trying to decarbonize in countries like Nigeria, where there is no grid and there is literally no path to decarbonization. But we are going to do this. And if we do it, it's going to prove that it's possible. And we should also do other things. I sit on the board of the Heineken Africa Foundation, where we're working on poverty in Africa, and we're working on many topics. But I think the hardest topic that we're working on is decarbonization. And there's so much greenwashing, and there's so much doubt about whether this is real. And by 2030, we are going to decarbonize in production scope 1 and 2 per the Science Based Targets Initiative. And I really think this is one of the greatest leadership challenges of my generation, is to prove that we can really do it. And I'm terrified every day waking up thinking about it, but I'm also incredibly motivated to prove that this is possible. Yeah, thank you.
Speaks so strongly to purpose, right? Why we do what we do.
Yeah, yeah.
And also in the back.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Jason. I'm a grad student in the multimedia program. And as someone who wants to get international work experience after graduation, what advice would you give to someone who's about to start their career?
Sure, yeah. There are practical elements of getting international experience, like visas and which passports do you hold and all that jazz. And so sometimes working with that in mind, which passport do you have and where can you work legally, and are there countries where you can get work visas relatively easily or not easily? I have friends who have European grandparents. They were able to get EU passports, and then they can work in the EU. So they can kind of go to Europe, for example, and then they can find a job. And for me, I have an American passport. I don't have any European grandparents. I don't have a way to get a work visa other than to join a big company, which is why I joined a big company. And now I'm with Heineken, and they got me my credentials to be able to work in the Netherlands. But the first 10 years of my career, when I was graduating, like all of you, I joined GE, and then they sponsored my work visas all over the world. So my experience tells me that big companies are a good way because they do it all the time, they have the resources, but maybe you also have other ways and other places you can go that are an advantage to you, and you should take advantage of those.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
While you're back right behind you, Kennedy, there's a hand, and then we'll come right back down to the front.
I'm Glenn, an alum in the Engineering Computer Science program, originally from Rhinebeck, New York in the Hudson Valley. You seem fearless. How do you overcome your fear, to take these risks, jumping from opportunity to opportunity? And also, how do you help your subordinates overcome their fears to become better at what they do? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was just in Rhinebeck because my grandmother turned 90 last summer, so we had a great time going to Rhinebeck and enjoying the community there. I think the way that my brain works, and this isn't necessarily a good thing per se, but I say yes first and then I deal with the consequences later kind of thing. So, do you want to go skydiving? Yes, skydiving. Been there a few times. So I think it's somehow my chemistry that my brain doesn't process what a bad idea something is in the beginning potentially. And I just say yes and I go for it. But the other thing that I learned over time is once I started saying yes to things that were scary and then realizing that good things happened most of the time because of it, then it started to build my confidence. Like, oh, but I did that, so I think if I say yes to this, what's the worst that could happen? With my team, I try to sense what they need from me. Because some folks are very confident and they're sometimes overconfident. Actually, I can think of a colleague right now who comes to mind immediately, who is very ambitious and has a lot of talents, but they also have some hard things that they need to hear. And I think they can get there, and we're actually investing a lot in this person because I believe in them, but my approach with that person is going to be different than another colleague who I think doesn't understand the talent that they have. And maybe they're not realizing how high is high for them. For that person, I'm going to try to paint the picture of the dream that I could imagine potentially for them, but also it has to be their dream, so you have to create space for them to think about what is their dream coming from inside of them. So I think it varies a lot, but I think also showing people that you believe in them and having conversations very early, way before promotions would happen, or I had a conversation yesterday with someone who I think is probably 3 to 4 years from taking their next step, But I wanted to have that first discussion with them about the dreams they have for themselves and what gives them energy, because I want to work for the next 3 or 4 years to lay all the bricks. So when that moment comes for them, their name is on all the right succession plans, they've had all the right experiences and training, they've had all the right exposure, and when we get into the promotion meeting, everyone around the table is going to say, this is a no-brainer, this person is ready, but it doesn't happen automatically. Yeah, thank you.
I think we have time for maybe the last 2 questions, if we've got time. So Kennedy, all the way down on the aisle, and then we'll come back to Professor Hong for the final question.
Hi, my name is Matt. I'm a senior studying PR, Spanish, and music. I heard you were in FYP. Did you do Pippin as your show?
I was in a chorus line.
You're in a chorus
So I
line.
was the year after, right? Pippin was the year before me, I think.
Okay,
And then Kiss of the Spider Woman was the year after.
that was, yeah, okay. I was just curious because they're redoing that this year.
They're doing Pippin?
Yeah,
Oh, I was in Pippin in Summerstock Theater. I was the queen.
lovely. Okay,
It was a great show.
since I've heard about CSR, that's like what I've wanted to do. And I've been curious because you mentioned both the empathetic listening and then the stakeholders, how much you rely on the existing audience of people who are involved in your process and how much the creative direction is you going out and forging your own path that nobody has ever interacted with before.
Yeah. Super interesting question. I think there are challenges that we tackle where incrementalism is okay. So, yeah, a lot of things actually are probably like that, where you're working with your stakeholders, you have some consumer insights data, and you can make some good things happen because of that. There are other spaces where totally different new-to-the-world thinking is needed. One of the spaces that I'm very interested in is the no-alcohol adult beverage space. I think that adults want something special sometimes that's like a treat, but you don't always want to have alcohol in it because maybe you're driving, or frankly, I don't drink that much alcohol. I work for an alcohol company, but there are a lot of occasions when I would prefer to have something non-alcoholic. I wake up super early, I'm sporty, I do a lot of sports, like sometimes yes, sometimes no for me. I think we can make the non-alcoholic adult refreshing beverage space really exciting, but I don't see things that really check all my boxes right now that exist in the world, and I don't quite know why. Is it because the technology isn't there? Is it because it's just a bunch of folks with a certain taste profile who are doing all the inventing of these liquids? But I think that's an example where I'd love to go out and really get exposed to a lot of different consumers, a lot of different places, and figure out how can we meet this consumer need that I feel and I see in our market research, but I don't think it's being met right now, even 50% being met by the products that are on the market. I think that that's probably 10% of the time, and 90% of the time we can keep going with, or maybe it's 80-20, more incremental improvement and mini breakthroughs. And then the 10 or 20% of the time, yeah, you really have to push yourself and think outside the box and invent something new to the world. Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a super interesting question. All right, the grand finale.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Suyeon Hong, and I'm Associate Teaching Professor in Public Relations. And you said earlier that you are the only, one of the 2 women executives at Heineken. Why is that?
That's a really good question, isn't it? Why is that? Why is that? I think it's because 80% of the beer drinkers in the world are men, and the product, for some reason, and it's not in every country. Like in Vietnam, it's much more gender balanced, but in many countries, in this country for sure, and in the States, it's a predominantly male-consumed product. And so, like when I worked at ESPN, it was also at the time, I think they've done a lot now, but at the time, in the kind of 99, 2000, it was 90% men, I think. And I guess it's because men in sports, it's a thing. I play sports too, by the way. I love sports, so probably also having to do with so many traditional profiles in the workforce up until that time. I also had friends that worked at Victoria's Secret, and there were a lot of ladies. So I think some industries maybe skew one way or the other. With that said, I think we are missing a huge commercial opportunity by forgetting that there are women in the world. And I see, frankly, a lot of the ideas that come to the table, and I think that's a very nice idea. It completely doesn't appeal to me. So we are doing a lot better in the company by being intentional. I think they say if you don't know where you want to go, any road will take you there. I don't think we were super intentional for many years. In 2020, we set an ambition to move to 40% gender representation in senior leadership on the way to gender balance. When I joined the company in 2012, we had 11% women in leadership, which is, I remember walking into those rooms, because I worked in very gender balanced companies before that and thinking this is something different. Now I think we are at, danger, I think 27%. I think we're going to be hopefully achieving some of our goals that we set for 2025 even earlier, knock on wood. So we're really making progress, but I suppose it was muscle memory. For a long time, we were founded by a man, businesses run by men, and we weren't that intentional about making the change. With this new leadership team, it's completely different. Our CEO has an amazing wife who has big ideas and doesn't let him off the hook, and 2 amazing teenage daughters. So he got the memo big time on why this was going to be a priority, and we've made it a priority in the leadership team. Yeah. So hopefully when I'm here in the years to come, I can report on much more progress. Thank you.
Perhaps, perhaps as the next CEO of Heineken.
Oh my goodness, now wouldn't that be a scandal?
Well, I think, what wonderful questions from our audience tonight. One of the fascinating pieces of the work that you do is that it really wasn't until the last 2 questions that we talked about the product of the work that you do, which is just an observation.
Yeah, interesting.
But it really does show the power of business, the power of communication, and the responsibility of being a leader in communication. So a leader in communication, Stacey Tank, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great, thank you so much. That was
Wonderful.
great.